Like to go ahead and get started with the Portland Parks Board, Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, starting at 5:02. Michelle, could we please have the roll call? Corbin? Here.
Bonnie? Oh, present.
Perfect.
Casey?
Here.
David? Don't see David. Chris? Chris is. Adrian? Adam is absent. Aaron? Here. Sabrina? Here. Allie? Here. Kirsten. Suen?
Yep.
Jonathan?
Here.
Matt? Patty? Here. Jessica?
Here.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Do we have anybody online or in person for public comment?
We do have a few folks that are here. If you would like to speak for public comment, please raise your hand. I see one person, Sean. For public comment, we allow 2 minutes. Same with Dee Dee. First will be Sean, next will be Dee Dee. We allow you 2 minutes for public testimony. And I will go ahead and allow you to talk with Sean.
Thank you. Sean, please go
Hello.
ahead. Yes, we can
Can you
hear
hear
you.
me? Hey, my name's Sean. I'm with Portland Bike Pillow, and we just wanted to speak about reopening talks with the Parks Department about searching for a new court. There were talks with the city in 2019 and 2020 about looking for new parks and places to play, but that was all shelved once the pandemic hit. So we're looking to reorganize and get that effort started again. Basically, Alberta Park needs a lot of work. We share it with 4 other clubs, hockey clubs, and we're looking for basically an updated facility to play that has a nice surface, boards that fit our needs for bikes, and lights. So we're asking the city to look for new multi-sport court locations.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you.
Next is Dee Dee. Go ahead and test out your mic, Dee Dee.
There we go.
Is that-
Okay,
Is that the correct way of saying your name?
that is actually not correct. This is actually, my name is actually Chris. My computer that I'm using is Dee Dee's computer. I just was not able to change it in time.
Welcome, Chris. Go ahead and get started. You have
Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay, I would like to speak to the Parks Board about the potential sale of the Red Tail Golf Course. I'm concerned about that for several reasons. First off is the issue of sale of parklands. Red Tail Golf Course has been operated by under the auspices of the Portland Parks for the last 70 years, and now it's being talked about being sold to a private developer. And what concerns me about this is that if this park is sold, what is to prevent other parks to being sold in the future? My second concern is that as a green space, since parks are really a shared resource that are valuable to people across jurisdictions, I want to express my concern that this resource is going to be paved over and not be available for future recreation or future housing or some other use. The third thing that I'm concerned about is the impact that this will have on the other other golf courses that Portland operates. At the most recent Golf Advisory Committee meeting, documentation was presented that says basically Redtail underwrites the cost of operating all of the other golf courses. And my concern is that if this golf course is sold off and the funds aren't there, then there won't be operating funds for the rest of the golf courses in the city of Portland. And I hope that there is a position that you will take on this and clarify where you stand.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Chris, are we able to get, are you able to input in the Q&A your email if you would like to submit one so we can submit this to our teams? For
Yeah,
response?
I actually was able to submit this earlier today, but wanted to have the opportunity, since you gave me the opportunities to speak, I thought that would be best to take advantage of it at the time. So this did go was emailed out this
Okay,
morning.
I see it now.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you so much. We're moving on to general announcements.
Should we see if other folks?
Oh, is there other people?
We have a few other folks in the attendee list. If you would like to speak for public comment, please raise your hand.
Right.
Otherwise,
It looks like we're concluding public comment, and we will have public comment again at the end of the last 15 minutes of the meeting. So moving forward with general announcements. Any general announcement? All right, Bonnie, please go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot. It's not an actual announcement. It was just a slight revision to the agenda. Because I was only calling in for the financial sustainability working group. So I think Jonathan is going to take questions on that rather than myself.
Great, thank you so much. And moving forward, any other general announcements? All right, I have one. We are losing another board member. Just on the board, but this is a good thing. Jonathan is going to be moving to a new occupation that is park related, and we are so happy that he was able to serve us. Jonathan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it's you know, life happens and it's bittersweet, but yeah, I'll have to step away from the board, which is a bummer. I've really enjoyed serving. I've enjoyed serving with all of you, and yeah, while not directly involved anymore, I'll still follow closely all the great work you're doing to make our community a wonderful place to live. So thanks all, and appreciate all the assistance you've given me over the last year, and yeah, kudos and thank you.
Thank you so much for your service, Jonathan. Losing two good people. We just lost Alana. And again, thank you for her service as my co-chair. Any other announcements? All right. Moving forward, we have a nomination on the floor for a new co-chair, vice chair of the Portland Parks Board. I would like to put forward Allie Bergen's name. So it is a nomination, but we do have to vote for it. So all of those who are in favor.
Second.
Okay. All right, moving forward with a vote. All those in favor of bringing Allie on board as our co-vice chair, please raise your hand or raise your hand so we can get a count. Digital or in person?
I think you can vote for yourself. I feel like I should abstain.
Everybody?
Any discussion for the vote?
Oh. No.
Okay.
Any discussion? I should open that up. All right, but it looks like all those are for. Anybody against? One abstention, is that correct?
From Ally.
From Ally? See, that's weird. With that, it looks like it passes. Ally, thank you so much for stepping into this role. I look forward to working with you. Yay, some good news. All right. So moving forward with the approval of the April meeting minutes. Those might have been emailed to you recently, if you had a chance to look them over. Is there a motion to adopt the meeting minutes as is? Or any motion to vote for and adopt the meeting minutes? Do I have a second?
I realize that it was sent today after noticing the error. So if we want to move voting for them the next June retreat, we can do that.
Would you prefer that? To give everybody a chance to read it? Okay.
Previous
so-
months were accidentally sent instead of.
So do we have to do a motion to
I don't think so. I think we can
just
just.
move it?
Just defer, we'll just defer.
Defer?
To
Take the
the.
All right,
retreat.
does that work for everybody? Perfect, we're gonna give everybody a
But
chance
read
for a
them
deep
soon
read.
because otherwise they'll be 3 months old and you really won't remember.
But there are recording, there's a recording.
Yeah,
for-
that
there's
is
a
true.
recording. So, and if you want to see yourself in the meeting, you can do that. We'll wear it. All right, with that, moving forward, we're gonna move to the director's report. Director Long, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just gonna report out on a couple of things and then I'm gonna pass the mic to Claudio Capuzano, who's going to give us an update on the mayor's proposed budget. But I just wanted to note a couple of things, just to remind the board that if they're communicating with park staff to please copy either a division manager or Joey or myself. Just so that we can make sure that we're being consistent and clear and accountable to y'all. So I just want to put that out there. I wanted to give a little update on PSEF because it's come up in a couple of meetings over the last few months. Many of you might know that PSEF opened another round of applications called Collaborating for Climate Action. They're anticipating awarding $158 million in forecasted revenues through fiscal year 2029. The letters of intent to propose are due in just 3 days on May 17th. It was a pretty fast turnaround. We've been working on it for several weeks, but it still in all, it was about a 5-week turnaround. If selected to continue to a full proposal, those will be due in June or July with decisions sometime in September. So not a lot of time for community outreach, obviously. And for this round, it's a little bit different. Organizations can only be the lead applicant for one proposal during this round, with application amounts ranging between 20 to 100 million. So they're looking at doing fewer, larger grant proposals. We, as parks, could also serve as a partner on multiple other proposals. So we've been contacted by a few organizations to serve as a partner in that regard. So we met with myself, Sarah Huggins, Todd Lofgren, met with PSEF staff to discuss and refine a bureau proposal and to just basically better understand the types of projects that are likely to be most successful, because it sounds like it's getting more and more competitive. So we have put together a $75 million proposal titled Caring for Nature. Just high level, it includes community garden operating support and garden expansion, which is something we're hearing from the community that we don't have enough, and we agree. Restoration, habitat creation, and fire mitigation. So that is generally restoration, invasive removal, planting, and a couple of habitat specific projects. Frog Ferry is one of those, as well as mitigating algae bloom on the Willamette River. And fire mitigation would be a continuation of the pilot work that we've been doing at Forest Park, but hopefully expanding to other natural areas in East Portland that are also identified as fire risk. Ecologically Sustainable Landscape Initiative, which many of you might know as nature patches, as well as other horticultural services. Engaging East Portland low canopy neighbors in community tree planting. This would be working with many community organizations that have received a previous federal grant, but it was not a fully funded program. So this would hopefully address the gap. It also has a workforce component. And park pathway lighting, dark sky compliant LED conversion. So basically converting as many of our light poles as we possibly can to dark sky compliant LED lighting, just like it sounds. So it's really exciting, 75 million. It's a lot, given it's about half of what they're going to be awarding, but we were very cautious to choose programs that could be could be scaled. So if they say, oh, we love this one, but not for this much, we could probably move forward with, you know, implementing a project that would be smaller in scale. So it's just really exciting, and we'll let everyone know how it goes, but really no surprises in the area that we looked at. We wanted to do some alternative transportation, but they were looking for more like getting cars off the road type of proposals. And so our trail proposals weren't very well received. So any questions?
Yes, Ally, go ahead.
More just a comment for those who love PSEP that it periodically comes under threat. And it's a really important funding source, including this morning, PSEP presented to City Council, actually went, and there's questions and concerns. It's bringing a lot more money than it was initially meant to. Anyway, it's something that I recommend folks follow if they're not following it already, because it's, and now that bureaus can apply for money, it's a really big source that other cities don't have to be able to fight climate in a way that the city hadn't been able to previously and wouldn't be able to if that money wasn't there. And specifically emphasizing and working for impacted communities, frontline communities. So just as a whole, if you're not following it, it's a really important thing to follow by itself and for its relationship to parks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll remind folks that, you know, I mean, I think you all know this, there's a lot of tension between the original intent of PSEP and how it's evolved. But of course, there is also the fact that it's bringing in much higher revenue than anticipated. And even though a lot of funds have been awarded to community groups, I think what they're seeing is issues with capacity, like their ability to spend it and spend it quickly is challenged. So, you know, I applaud BPS and PSEP because they really are sort of building the plane as they go. I mean, given the fact that this tax was just approved, like what,
2019?
Yeah, like 2019, and the fact that they've managed to go through now 3 rounds of funding is pretty exceptional. And I feel like they're tweaking it, like every year they're gonna figure out how to make it better. And in fact, there's current job postings out online because they realize that they need more staff to help manage the work. So.
Yeah, and I'm hearing more and more community members being really upset around the intent of it. And my question to you and other city I guess bureaus is there anything in place, since this money is going to be coming in every year, hopefully, right? That there's a strategy to work with community members on the things that they actually need, that it can be folded into these proposals. Because at this point, even the idea of what does climate action mean could be really problematic to we're greening everything, but maybe the community members actually need like air purification, they might need air conditioning, they might need these other things, and how do we make sure that they get put into our public realms to serve them, or thinking about having more trees in parks or shading outside of trees. What are those opportunities, and how do we make sure that we're strategizing the way where it doesn't come off that bureaus or particular organizations are working against versus working with
Right.
the communities that this money was intended for?
Right. No, I appreciate that. Well, it's certainly not the role of Portland Parks and Recreation to do that. However, I do know that PSEF does do that, right? That is a part of their work and was a part of their original work in terms of their community engagement around PSEF. It's like, actually, the work session was very informative because they had some of the like original designers of the measure that were there and described really how it originated. So I feel like they actually did a really good job about that initial community engagement, and there is technical assistance there. I think, like I said, they're hiring even more staff because they realize they need to help the community do this work. I think that's basically what it boils down to. And if you look at like the 3 tranches of funding that have gone out the door and you look at the projects, you'll see that they are precisely those things, right? They are doing HVAC, they are doing winterization of homes. I mean, it's all of those things. So, yeah, and I continue to meet with PSEF staff and I can continue to inquire about it, but it feels like they're doing it and they're, like I said, kind of building the plane at times flying it, but again, still doing a remarkable job given the task at hand.
And it sounds like maybe having more information that the community can understand where money is going, how is
Yeah.
it rolling out, and how they can.
Yeah, the website is incredibly informative, and I'll remind folks that all work session meetings are recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it, it is available.
It looks like we have a couple hands, so Sabrina and then Ellie and Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah, as a PSEF grantee, awardee, I've definitely learned that throughout this process, there's a lot of technical information that nonprofits just might not have. I mean, I know at least for our project, it gets very technical, so I'm very interested to see how Parks partners with community organizations on the various projects that you all have applied for. And I also wonder if there's room for, maybe this already exists, for different parks folks and staff to be available to community who are doing these projects, maybe not technically in partnership, but being able to kind of tap into the knowledge base that exists within parks. I know that I'm probably going to tap people that I know, but if there are other ways that, PSEF grantees, nonprofit organizations are able to, connect with connect with parkies on their technical knowledge, I think that would be great.
Yeah, we get pinged a lot, and we've been asked to be partners for that exact reason, for not just our knowledge and expertise, but also we do steward 15% of the land mass that's called Portland, and many people want to do their projects on our property and also with us. So believe me, they are reaching out. I wish it was a little bit more coordinated. I think that that's an area where PSEF could have done a better job, is to do some matchmaking because it's very random. Like, we're getting emails and calls and not always to the right people. And so it's been a lot of scurrying, but we're trying to make those matches where we can. And of course, Sabrina, if there's anything that comes to mind that where you think we might be helpful, I'm certainly open to hearing that and to be, matched, as it were.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Ellie.
I'll just say, as someone who's had questions and concerns and wanting improvements to PSEF over the years, staff are really receptive to meeting and having those conversations, and it does feel, as you said, you know, as Adina said, they're building as they make it, but they really do, they care about building it. They care about building it in an equitable way. You can really feel the passion in the staff for making this great, and they are receptive to public feedback, and they do work with folks with questions on their, I mean, so I will say, as far as city bureaus go, where it's not a bureau, I'm not sure
Well,
exactly.
Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is a
Okay.
bureau, so
Yeah.
it is a program of the, but
I will just say it's been a nice open door feel to it, to really be able to provide meaningful feedback, hear answers, work with staff, and sometimes not just right in a short time, but over years. So
Thank you, Alan. Okay.
Yeah, a couple questions. So the proposal sounds phenomenal, sounds really good, and I'm just curious, what the feedback was, from kind of a grantsmanship perspective of getting sort of a big menu of things versus, focusing in on one or two. So I'm just curious about that.
So we rely on conversations we're having
Yeah.
with the program manager and also the director, it's now the DCA, but the former director at BPS. And they had, we had, I'm gonna try to remember, we had a few buckets. So one was around transportation, caring for nature. We had like sustainable, like technology, like infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, I can't remember. And so, many of the proposals would have fit into multiple categories, and we just like very broadly said, we've got these four, buckets that we're thinking of, and these are the types of projects, and they just gave feedback, and we just slowly tweaked it, and then when, it's 158 million seems like a lot, but when you've got, dozens of organizations that are gonna be applying for it, and we believe there are some projects that are already in the queue, like 82nd Street is a big transportation project that we're guessing will likely be getting funding, or at least will have a very strong proposal.
Yeah.
So at this point, it feels like it was more just getting input and sort of vetting them through staff who've gone through it. I mean, literally, the next step is just the letter of intent. So our process has been 3 weeks. And we're not even writing the grant yet. I mean, the proposal yet. So.
That's great. The second part of my question was for those of you more involved, Adina, Ellie, and I think it sounds like Sabina knows them well. Are they doing better with lifting up smaller community organizations kind of through this? Is that something they presented? Or is it too soon? I mean, I know that was early frustration was sort of too many failures with sort of unvetted organizations that they were giving grants to.
I think they had a couple early missteps. I think it was just one individual organization that
Okay.
wasn't well vetted, and it turned out that they were problematic. I don't know how their process has changed to ensure that that's no longer the case, but
Yeah.
So their grant committee is like us, they're volunteers.
Yeah.
So what they have done, and one of the reasons I believe they're hiring more staff is they got like 300 grant applications, which is, I mean, imagine us being asked to review and vet and be really in detail with 300 applications, right? It's not. So they're turning that over to staff, part of that process for it then to go to the grant committee, which I think helps with that. And one of the reasons that they need more capacity, it's a big program to run. So I can't speak to past versus now, but I will say that I think that process sounds much better for being able to move things through.
Great.
Yeah. While keeping the community piece, which is really central to PSAF, really.
Yeah. Thank you. Looks like we have a hand up for Sabrina. Please go ahead.
I was just going to add briefly, I don't obviously work for PSEF or know all their internal processes, but I know that their reporting is pretty intense and detailed. They have quite a bit of due diligence. And so I will say they're definitely putting in the work on that part. And I've actually even heard from much smaller organizations who get awarded PSEF funds, that's actually hard for them to do, or the hardest, grant that they have to report on, because it does take quite a bit of capacity. And, as we all know, nonprofits, no one really likes to fund the administrative stuff. And so, so I'll just say that's from my perspective. I do know that their reporting is very, very thorough.
Sabrina, they do have, or what I've understood is they have like even grants for organizations to be able to invest the time to see if they can apply for a grant, like they have that preliminary time to be able to boost it. So I don't know if they also have that additional funds for helping with that robust reporting, but I'd be curious if they do.
Yeah, they do have that reporting in the application, and I put in the chat, the PSEF staff are really great, because they will call us and work with us and, okay, what system do you use for payroll and timesheets and all the things? So, I mean, I know they're putting in the work to not let that be the barrier. So,
I mean, right, that is they want to give the money away. This is right.
It's a good problem.
It's competitive and as transparent as I've, a system I've ever seen. So, yeah.
Is there anything to add to your director's report? Because I want to make sure that there's time for the budget update.
Yeah, no, I wanted to keep it to just that, because I know there were a lot of questions about it. And I also felt, because we had such a short turnaround, I wanted to, bring y'all along as best I could, even though, the deadlines are nipping at our heels. So that's why I wanted to talk about the PSEF. So unless there was something in the director's report that is like burning a hole in somebody's pocket, I'd like to.
I just wanted to say it was a really cool thing, and I can't pull it up right now, but one of the community centers did this like 10-minute workout thing where people could try a bunch of different styles of fitness classes, and people came, and then it ended up like boosting attendance by 50% at Future. I mean, it was such a cool, innovative way to get people to like, who are nervous about dipping in that way, to do it in a way that's really like, oh, I don't have to worry if I can withstand a whole hour of this, or do I like it? I don't know. I just thought it was like, it was a very cool thing, and it seems like it
Thank
worked
you.
really well.
I appreciate that. Maximo, take note. Replicate the right.
Sounds good. Matt and then Suen.
Yeah, Director Lang said it. I was curious. There was a reference on the first page to Oregon Queer History Collective Change.org petition.
I believe that is about, I want to say about Darcel, right? Yeah, so it's just a petition about having
It's a petition about having fences installed over at Darcel's Showplace.
not Showplace,
I'm sorry,
Darcel's
Darcel's
15 Plaza.
Plaza.
Yes, I go to it.
That'd be it.
And our team has actively been engaging with them, which is why they were aware of the fence concern when it was initially brought up.
Sorry.
Thank you, Suen. Go ahead, please.
We'll piggyback on that whole conversation about the fence. I would hope that there's some effort to, if a fence has to be there, can we make it as creative, as artistic as possible? So it's not a fence, but it's an art kind of display and art enclosure, right? But the director's report, I thought was really cute when one of the staff was able to rescue a little duckling.
Yes.
Fell into the sewer. I don't know how that duckling was able to communicate, but these are the stories. If we are able to make it available for almost like a little news page for kids. And just bring them to appreciate what the park staff would do, go extra mile to save that little duckling. It's just sweetest, and it's got buried into these pages of words, and that little photo.
Well, it was
it's
in our
wonderful.
employee newsletter and it got social media, so
Yeah.
we definitely try to elevate the cute stories as much as we can.
Yes.
And I believe that the mama duck and the other ducklings were calling for the, so
Good
they
job.
they were alerted.
Thank you so much, Luann. Casey, please go ahead.
Just quickly, and maybe for a subsequent meeting, maybe a couple of months from now, I'd be curious to hear more about the Zen Desk. I'd be interested to know how it's being advertised to the community. And then once you're getting more information, more contact on there, how you're going to prioritize, how it all works internally. So I know you're just starting it up, but I'm really curious about how all this is going to work.
Okay, we'll figure out how to where the best platform is to discuss that.
And I want to jump in there and say that we do have a online bus route to the parks up, and please engage that and look at it. We're hoping in the future meeting that we can have a more thorough conversation about what that means to make our parks accessible through public transportation. So I wanted to directly thank staff and Director Long for making that possible. And I suggest everybody go check it out. Any other questions or concerns regarding the director's report? So the budget update.
All right. Well, we are definitely in the thick of budget right now. The mayor's proposed was released 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. We had a council work session last week. There was some discussion of parks and particularly PSEP that was in that work session. So if folks want to tune in for more detail, I'll give a little here. But related to the budget process, we also had that work session on PSEP this morning that was mentioned earlier. And tomorrow, the approved budget is going to be heard and approved by City Council sitting as the Budget Committee. So there are a number of amendments that are likely to be heard. I'll give a really quick high-level summary of what we're expecting. Obviously, that's still in the works, so we'll know more tomorrow in the council hearing. But I will give a full debrief on what actually happens in the hearing tomorrow to the Financial Sustainability Working Group. Do that after the fact on Thursday. But so what is in the proposed budget? So first of all, as a reminder, Portland Parks and Recreation took a 5% reduction on our general fund allocation. That amounted to $4.6 million reduction. And the mayor's proposed just to put that in context, the mayor's proposed had a bit over $11 million total in general fund cuts citywide. So we were a little less than half of the general fund cuts in the city. So in addition, our budget includes an ongoing reduction of $6 million to the Parks Levy revenue forecast. That's based on compression largely in downtown properties, where we're seeing some pretty significant drops in real market value, 50, even 75% in some cases. We talked about those as part of the request, and both of those were in our requested budget and moved through to the proposed. And as we said back then, that we do have a substantial balance in the Parks Levy that's been generated over the last several years, and that's really serving as a shock absorber in the near term as we absorb those reductions. So as far as changes in the mayor's proposed, there is some good news. We did have a $1.7 million increase in the impact reduction program that was in the requested budget. So we were told that our charges were going up by $1.7 million, and this is for campsite cleanup and outreach done by previously OMF, but I think they're being pulled out of the Office of Management and Finance. And so that went down from $2.7 million to $1.2 million on a one-time basis. So that's that was a big piece of positive news, about a $1.5 million reduction on a one-time basis in the proposed. So the increase wasn't as nearly as much as we expected it to be. Also, as we move Title 11 trees development functions into the new single permitting authority, and my apologies, I forget their new name, but they did settle on one. There was a gap that was identified between the expenses for the program that they're building and the revenues that we're projecting that we will be passing over to them. And so that gap has been directed to be filled by Parks in the 24-25 budget. So we'll be paying them an interagency to fill that gap of around $272,000. And we expect that there may be an amendment tomorrow that would ensure that this is truly just a one-time subsidy to the new group with the expectation that they move to a full cost recovery model. But in the meantime, we've got that subsidy in next year. So a couple of, we talked about PSEF a little bit. As folks here probably know, we've been we've worked very closely with BPS and PSEF on identifying opportunities, and some of the biggest ones have been in our urban forestry program. In September, we had $40 million over 5 years allocated for equitable tree canopy. And most recently, we made a request for $100 million to do a suite of programs that, under the broad description of tree protection and care. And a big component of that would be the maintenance of trees in the right of way. So that proposal was reduced to $65 million over 5 years, and the $35 million that would complete the $100 million was actually used to offset existing programming in urban forestry to generate savings in the general funds to the tune of about $7 million a year. One thing that we worked with CBO, City Budget Office, to understand was that was really allocated as a flat amount, whereas the general fund that we had would have grown with inflationary factors. And so we're expecting to see an amendment tomorrow that would help to right size that and ensure that we do continue to have the same amount of overall resource that we would have had with the general fund. So we're also expecting to see a discussion about park rangers and their role in providing public safety. And given that public safety was held harmless as part of this budget process, potentially seeing an offset there and an add back, to the roughly $370,000. There's also a very wonky item about sort of composite health benefits. So the city recently made the decision to charge bureaus. So we have a health fund that charges individual bureaus for the health benefits provided to city employees. The charges historically have been based on whether the beneficiary has one or two party insurance or a family plan, and they moved to a blended model, which frankly I think everybody agrees is the right way to go. It creates predictability, stability, and fairness across bureaus. But it also has a one-time impact, and our sense was that that one-time impact was pretty significant on parks, and so we're hoping to see some budget note or otherwise that would indicate that Bureau of Human Resources and City Budget Office would assess that impact and make the winners and losers whole. So those are kind of the highlights of what's in there. Like I said, a lot in play right now. We will be finding out about the outcome of some of those amendments, whether they'll be brought forward, whether they'll pass, and I will give the financial sustainability working group the full update on Thursday. So any questions? And Todd, Director, if I've missed anything that you wanted me to highlight.
Thank you so much. Opening the floor to the board.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Have about 15 minutes for discussion or questions. If we have any further comments or questions, we can send them your way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll
Absolutely.
just,
I'll get some clarification.
Bonnie, go ahead.
Claudia, I just wanted to get clarity with respect to the accounting process and policies of sweeping the general fund dollars first to ensure the most leverage of the levy dollars. I know that there was some discussion about that, adopting that as a policy, so that it wouldn't need to be kind of revisited and major case every bump process. Is that something that is still in process, or is that at this point is?
I don't, so there, I think that it's now settled law and we've got precedent of city budget office acknowledging it and giving us recommending compensation set aside as part of the spring bump. So I think we're 100% there, but we'll call it 99% of the way, and we'll test it again next year.
Okay,
but I would expect it to be relatively smooth because city budget office did recommend it using the logic that we've laid out for them.
Thank you. Ally, please go ahead.
Did I hear right that Parks is, in terms of budget cuts, about 40 to 45% is gonna be to Parks versus, and that's including all other bureaus? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's a function of the fact that we are one of really only two large bureaus once you exclude the public safety bureaus from the reduction target calculation. So police and fire and Bureau of Emergency Communications, sometimes known as 911, they did not receive reductions. And so the largest bureaus that are impacted are Portland Parks and Recreation, which has nearly a $90 million general fund budget, and the Office of Management and Finance, which has a pretty significant budget. I'm not sure what their general fund budget is, but they're also pretty impacted.
Is this a typical percentage cut to see in a budget cycle for Parks, or is this unusually high?
I've been around for 15 years. It's on the higher side. I think that typically, it's also, there's also two different things. There's the cut and the net cut. Usually at the beginning of the process, there's a cut target that's established. Bureaus, generate reduction ideas to meet that target. But then there's usually sort of add backs and also potentially new ads that offset. It's on the higher side. And there in over the years, there haven't been too many instances that there's been this much of a differential between public safety and non-public safety, although particularly in the teens, I believe there were a number of years where I think it was 2.5% for public safety, 5% for non-public safety. But it's been a while.
Okay, well, I would ask if there's a role for the board to take in pressing for less of a significant cut to Parks in this, and to see what that's gonna, and to understand what that's gonna cost Parks. In terms of, so I'd love more understanding of that and to understand how we can advocate if appropriate.
Yeah, so there was a public hearing last week for the budget, and tomorrow they will vote on it. So there's a very small time frame, but that's not to say that advocacy to support the commissioners' amendments would be too late, I think. But I don't know, Todd, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I said, we've got amendment process tomorrow, and Commissioner Ryan's working to finalize those, so we could try to connect. If there was someone from the board that wanted to do advocacy, we could try to connect you to Commissioner Ryan's office.
And I mean, as far as the board, like, sort of logistics go, generally there's been, you know, if something gets written on behalf of the board, either it gets sort of delegated to a particular committee, who's sort of given, you know, the ability, whatever, the autonomy to write a letter or what have you, but it is a quick turnaround, so I am not sure how you'd want to proceed.
What time is it happening?
Say that again.
What time is it happening and who's available for
2 to
testimony?
4.
2 to 4. Are there any board members that are available that would like to give testimony on behalf of Portland Parks and Recreation? Everybody a minute to check their calendars.
You said tomorrow or Friday? Tomorrow.
Is there someone from staff I could connect with to get briefed in advance?
Yeah.
Then yes.
That's Ally. Thank you so much for stepping up. Our new co-vice chair. Which is
Seems
perfect.
co-vice scary thing to do, right?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for stepping into that role. And is there any other questions regarding this?
What was the percent last year reduction? Just.
There were no reductions last year.
So is this the first time it's been reduced? There's been a reduction in how many years?
So last year was a year without a reduction. The year before that, we did take a one-time reduction. So I would need to go back. I wouldn't trust my memory. I'd need to go back and check, but it's been a couple of years.
But it wasn't 45%.
I'm sorry. It wasn't 5%. Did you say 45%?
Yeah.
Isn't it like 4.6 out of 11? I did the like loose math.
Yeah, so our
Okay.
share of the total reductions was about 45%, but the percent reduction on our allocation was 5%.
5%. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Floor is still open. Board. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
thank
so
you,
much.
Claudio, for making yourself available.
Sure. Thank you, everybody.
Unfortunately, they did a study of mayors in 2020, and they usually use Parks and Recreation as the first place to cut.
Yep.
In the height of COVID. Remember when it was a critical infrastructure? It still is, and I hope we can make that clear to mayor and the council. Thank you. Moving forward to the working group reports. Do keep in mind the community engagement working group did not meet due to really poor scheduling and everybody being busy for the first time. So we weren't able to have a quorum, so it was canceled. And I believe, forgive me, did we come up with a name for the recreational new working group? Was unable to meet because of a holiday.
It was Passover and there were other conflicts.
So that's why they are not listed in the working group report. But going forward, more starting with the Board Affairs Working Group. Casey, anything that you would like to say? You have 2 or 3 minutes, or if there's any questions from the board.
Actually,
Please
just
go ahead.
one quick addition, or it's not really an addition, but just to remind people that we are having a retreat in June. If you have any issues that you possibly like discussed at the retreat, could you possibly contact me or Corbin or Ally before May 28th? Would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Any questions or statements from the board? Thank you. Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group. David, any announcements? Thought I saw David.
David, you took yourself off mute and then promptly put yourself back on.
I don't have any announcements.
Thank you so much, David. Any questions or statements from the board? Thank you so much. Moving to the Financial Sustainability Working Group. Bonnie, any statements to be made?
Yeah, I had to call in, I was on my phone in a car during this last one, so Jonathan took the notes and I see my time to him.
Yeah, I have nothing. So
Add, right, okay, thank you. Need to finish
sorry, I'm in a car with a kid pickup, and so if I'm cutting out, I apologize.
that. No worries, thank you so much, Jonathan. Any questions or statements from the board? Matt, please go ahead.
I had a question about the alternative funding options. I don't know if this is a place to ask that question.
That's fine.
Slide deck.
Yeah, go ahead.
The opposition to the Parks District from government entities, what was that based in?
Say it again.
The opposition to a Parks District from other governmental entities, I think like TPA, TPRD, and maybe a couple other folks. What was the?
So I'm going to try my best, but thankfully Todd is still on the line, so he can jump in. So the opposition was from the Special District Association, as well as THPRD, Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation, and Bend Parks and Rec. Their opposition was based on, they felt that the legislation, even with the population cap or limit that we included, that it still left them vulnerable from their respective cities who were looking to take control of their parks and recreation systems back from their current district status. And so, yeah, and so we've continued conversations with them and their lawyers to come up with language that they would be acceptable to them. And so we plan to go back to legislation this next session. Todd, anything to add? Did I butcher that?
You got it.
Yeah, I butchered it.
No, it's perfect, perfect.
All right, cool.
Thank you. And that concludes the working group reports. Portland Parks Foundation, Jessica, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I want to put in one final plug for anybody who hasn't registered for the Spring Friends and Allies Summit. It's on Thursday. So register if you haven't. It's sure to be a nice event. I think the main thing that I wanted to bring up today to talk about is something that I discussed with the working group affairs, anyway.
Board Affairs.
Board Affairs, thank you, Board Affairs group. Is about a collaboration with the Parks Board and the Portland Parks Foundation on a candidates forum later this fall for the commissioners, as well as a mayoral forum. So in the past, Portland Parks Foundation has hosted a couple different versions online for candidates forums. I feel like the one that would be most similar to something like this in the fall is one that we hosted in April 2020. And in that setting, there were over 30 candidates. It was the primary for several different seats on city council. And we ended up having a process where there was a write-in of several different answers related to our parks. And thank you, Adina, council members, not commissioners. Through this, there was then a selection process that included Parks Board members and PPF board members to evaluate all of the different answers. And then 8 candidates total were invited to participate in the forum. So what we talked about in the Board Affairs group was actually forming in the near future, maybe starting in June, an ad hoc committee made up of Portland Parks Foundation board members and Parks Board members to start to think about what this process looks like and how it would take place. There's conversations about, is it something that can be in person and streamed live versus just virtual? Do we have one for each district versus all of them combined? And so anyway, so that's something that's really exciting, and I think a great opportunity for the Parks Board and Portland Parks Foundation to work together. And then to provide an opportunity for the community to hear from the candidates on what their position with parks is. So I guess my I actually emailed Michelle kind of a follow-up of what I shared with the Board Affairs group of just the outline of how we set up the forum in 2020. So she can email that out to all of you. But I think the next step would be to figure out if, which members from the Parks Board would like to participate. We have a board meeting next Monday where I will be sharing similar information to our board to see who's interested in working on this as well. And then we can start to create a process for this time. And I think just starting sooner so we can think about who facilitators are, where we would like to have the forums would be great.
Thank you so much. And we do have a question from Erin. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I just thought I'd bring up, not during my time, and I don't know when, but I know the Parks Board has in the past also done candidate forums. Again, I think many years ago, so it wouldn't be something completely unique, but I love the idea and would love to be involved too if we want to do that.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I really think this could just be put on as a collaboration with the Parks Board and PPF. And so,
Dr.
yeah,
Long.
I
Go
hope
ahead.
you do want to do it with us. Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, Jessica, it's Adina. I just wanted to note that we have gotten some direction from the city attorney's office around how staff can and cannot be involved in this type of activity. And I believe we were going to inquire as to whether or not it extended to board members, but I can't recall where we left that. And I'm looking at Michelle, who's looking at me blankly.
We essentially, we've let Portland Parks Foundation take this on due to the fact that if we were to have for all of the candidates running for all of the districts, it would be through our public testimony channel. And I think it would take several meetings for each.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not even suggesting that. I think we're past them coming to the Parks Board. I'm talking about Parks Board members being involved in a forum. Like, I think the foundation can invite whoever they want. As a city entity, you have to invite everyone. So I want to make sure that that rule doesn't transcend over to the Parks Board. So if we're partnering, it might change things. So I think that's what we were inviting Linda to come to the next Board Affairs working group to have a conversation about it. So I hope that we can figure out how to do it, or you all can figure out how to do it. We have to stay out of it. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why we're thinking about it in the fall versus sooner, because,
But you might have less candidates. by
yeah,
then.
that's the person. There's quite a herd right now. But with that said, some of the conversation was around how to collaborate and generate specific questions. Could be an opportunity. So there's still some things to work out, but maybe we can do that through the ad hoc committee and moving forward. Jessica, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just
Ivana?
wanted to clarify the level of questioning, there's being involved in the development of the forums themselves as Parks Board members and being on the ad hoc committee. And then there's kind of publicly saying in partnership, the Parks Board and PPF are putting on these forums. So I would say the legal question is kind of twofold. One, can Parks Board be part of the process? And then can we take it up a notch and have it be hosted by the two of us outside of these meetings and in forums? And a neutral off-site location, so to speak. Yeah, and I think in terms of process and everything, what would be great is to find out who here is interested. I'll find out from the Parks Foundation Board, and then we can connect and set up a meeting and kind of work through the nuances and legal limitations, if there are any, by then. But I think there's a lot to figure out and being on top of this. And so we're ready in the fall and we've reached out by summer to the candidates with our questions would be great.
Thank you, Jessica. Bonnie.
Yeah, thanks. Just for context, I know when we had done this in the past, it was Randy as executive director and 2 foundation board members, and then it was 3 members of the board. So it was me, Paul, and Patty. So I remember that was the way it took place. And my recollection was that it was shortly after the pandemic. So it was just a few of us in the room with Loretta Smith and then Joanne Hardesty, or maybe Joanne Hardesty and then Loretta Smith. So I think that one thing that we need to consider that I think Adina is alluding to is that, we certainly it can't be the entire board because then we have quorum and then we have those issues to contend with. But, the extent to which a smaller group of board members can be pretty involved in the process and also provide the candidates with appropriate levels of context as to the role of the Parks Board in advising the city and the Bureau, I think is really helpful because I think a lot of the candidates just weren't really fully aware of that relationship.
Thank you for that, Bonnie. Yeah, it sounds like this is going to be a very interesting from scratch, figuring this out, especially with the city getting a little bit more complicated as it figures out how it's going to look like in the next couple of months and years. Jessica, is there anything to add to your report?
Well, with Jonathan leaving, that leaves a hole in the ex officio spot on our board. So I guess I'll circle back with you about who might be interested.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica, for that. And board members who are interested in moving forward with this ad hoc, do remember we're going to probably have a lot of back and forth to make sure that we're in compliance and we're doing it correctly. So be prepared for that as well. This is not to shy anybody away. Just realize you have to roll up your sleeves. Moving forward, we are at 6:09, so we're a little early. Let's go ahead and get started with the ADA Transition Plan annual report. And we have Evan, is it Callahan?
Nope.
And Lauren Guire, which is she online? Okay.
Yeah, I believe she's online, but before Evan gets started, I just want to do a little introductory.
Go ahead.
When Dr. Corbin and Alana at the time and myself met to talk about our agenda setting, we meet every month, a couple of weeks before our meeting. We talked about bringing the ADA transition plan to the board for various reasons. One, we're required to bring it to the commissioner, and anything that we bring to the commissioner, I feel like we should be bringing to the board as well. We do not need to bring this to council, but it's an important part of our work. And Dr. Corbin asked about other accessibility work that the Bureau is doing and suggested that we include that today. And I said, it's too big. So we'll do that another time. But I wanted to just point out a few areas that that Parks has moved towards and that are working on now. Melody Brooks is our interim equity manager, and she's also on the line, and she's been overseeing a small team at Parks for a little under a year. As a part of the transition, that team will be transitioning to report directly to Chief of Staff Kelly Torres in the Vibrant Communities area. So we're, as Parks tends to do, we like to elevate equity and inclusion to the highest level of authority within our work group. And so we're really excited about that. That'll be effective July 1, but I just wanted to give a little overview. In 2022, just 2 years ago, and as a part of, and in response to the park levy, the Bureau hired Jonathan Simeone, who has a disability, to be our first disability analyst. So just 2 years ago. And then in October of 2023, he started an Accessibility Champions Committee, where individuals from all of the bureau serve on this committee. And I like to say he's training the trainer, right? It takes many people to do this work. And in a way, so he's creating a culture. And so we have individuals from every work group that represent their work group on this committee. Through that committee, 40 or so staff have received training on how to address requests for accommodation and modification under Title II of the ADA. And the disability analyst, Jonathan, is currently working on 6 standard operating procedures that will help us do our work in a more consistent manner around accessibility. And those include SOPs regarding service animal access, complaints, accessible public events, and addressing requests for accommodation or modification under the. And then the third piece that I'm especially excited about is the disability analysts and our community engagement team are working on developing an SOP around how the Bureau will conduct disability community-specific community engagement work. So right now we have, and it was, Evan will refer to it in his report, we have a parks accessibility advisory committee that weighs in on all of our capital projects and the transition plan. And what I would like to do is make sure that when we do community engagement generally for the community on any project or program, that we're just being inclusive and we're not doing a separate process for folks. And so we're trying to shift the paradigm and how we're doing community engagement. So that's an exciting next step in our accessibility work. And we will have the team come and visit when we have time. But in the meantime, I'll pass it to Evan. I don't know if Lauren has opening words.
Sure. So Evan's here to present the ADA Transition Plan Annual Report for the fiscal year 22-23. Every year since council allocated $1 million per year to address ADA barriers, that began in 2018. That's when we established a real ADA program. We had been kind of doing it within capital projects ad hoc, you might say. So since then, we've created an annual report every year and have been presenting it to the commissioner and the Parks Board. So today, Evan's going to run through the program and the highlights of what has happened in the last year with a PowerPoint. He does have a full annual report, and those should have been included, I think, in the packet, right? So if you have any questions on that, he's happy to answer those too. Evan?
Thank you so much. Just as a reminder, we do have public comments at 6:45. So I might have to stop us whether we are in question mode or we might need to wrap up the presentation. But it looks like we have a board member question. Bonnie, before you get started.
Yeah, thank you very much for providing the context, Lauren and Adina. I do have a question, Adina, as you were talking about Mr. Simeone's work and developing the staff committee. It did immediately make me think about the advisory committee and how it integrates with that. And then I guess then you said something that I was not fully aware of, that advisory committee advises, the limits of their advisory is on the capital projects. Is that correct? I guess I'm interested to know, is it a conscious decision to make it limited to the capital projects and not other operating related
Now, my understanding is that the PAC has weighed in on recreation programs.
Okay.
As well. But I would say their most routine asks and requests have been around capital projects. And Evan actually manages that group, so he can probably speak to it a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be
more.
really interested to understand, how you're integrating both the staff committee and then the external advisory committee.
And I'll also add that the Accessibility Advisory Committee is more about training staff to be able to identify where there are barriers and how to eliminate barriers for participation in their work groups. And then Evan will talk a little bit about how he interacts with the PAC, but he also has a technical advisory committee that works on these things as well, and that's staff. So there is integration for sure, just not for the not for the champions, the accessibility champions, sorry.
However, one of the accessibility champions representing the Assets and Development Group is also on the Technical Advisory Committee.
Is that Jeremy?
No, it's a staff
No,
person.
it's
Oh,
not-
oh,
not
a staff
staff
person,
person.
excuse me.
Okay, so I'll begin. Let me see if I can get this screen shared properly and we'll get started.
Wonderful. So while you're doing that, just for the board members, we're gonna hold off our questions, so please write them down to the end of the presentation. Otherwise, we won't get through it because we have a lot of inquiring minds.
Got it.
Got it. Well. Always nice when this works out. Just trying to get my view corrected here. Well, I might have a little bit of technical juggling to do on my side, but I won't let that slow me down. So thank you for the introductions. My name is Evan Callahan. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm here today as a panelist in my capacity as the Parks Bureau's Transition Plan Program Coordinator to present on the program's annual report for fiscal year 22-23. This slide presents some background, both about the Americans with Disabilities Act as well as the city's response to the ADA Transition Plan Title II program. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination against people based on disability, including barriers to accessing state and local government facilities, programs, and services. This slide summarizes the timeline of the city's response and implementation here. In 2014, City Council adopted the ADA Title II Transition Plan, which identified approximately 25,000 barriers across the city, nearly 20,000 of which were on PP&R property. Following year, PP&R finalized a update specific to the park facilities, which further refined that number of barriers needing attention to 17,008. At that time in 2015, funding was not provided for barrier remediation. From 2016 to 2018, as we said in the introduction a little bit, barriers were addressed in an ad hoc manner through other existing funding sources. In 2018, City Council approved $1 million in ongoing annual funding for the formation of the official transition plan program beginning in fiscal year 2019-2020. And from that time, the transition plan program has continued the work that the Bureau was already doing and really worked a lot to analyze, collect, and track the data to remediate barriers identified in the plan.
Sorry to interrupt, but would it be easier if I did the slides if you had notes presenting?
That would be easier.
Okay, I could do that actually. I just realized you were talking about it earlier.
So you're gonna just take control?
I will take control, yes.
And you have it. Oh,
I do.
so you can unshare, Evan.
Thank you for the help. I think I stopped sharing.
It'll just take a few minutes for me to pull it up.
Say again. Okay. So I will keep going, as this is mostly text that I can kind of tell the story on when we get caught up. As long as it doesn't take over my screen. Since its organization, the Transition Plan Program has been guided by its charter, which states that the goal of the program is to address all physical barriers identified in the transition plan in an equitable, cost-efficient, holistic, and proactive manner.
froze now. I know I said it would be easier if I did it.
Yeah, you got it spot on.
Not yet. All right, well,
All right, so what exactly is the transition plan? I know I've said the words a lot, and now I will finally reveal the mystery. This slideshow covers this as specific, or oh, I'm sorry, this slide shows the cover of the 2015 park update to the transition plan, which is a product of a detailed assessment and analysis effort that was conducted in 2014 to identify the physical barriers across city facilities. It included a robust process around a robust structure around the process for that analysis, public engagement, methodologies, and notably for the purposes of our discussion and the transition plan program, a schedule for barrier removal and specific facility assessment reports for each public park facility. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide shows two images. The first one at left on your screen is a top-down image of a park with barriers called out by number. The other at right shows a text description of those barriers linked to the numbers from the map. These individual facility reports both listed and provided approximate geolocation of the barriers in the parks. And we rely on this data to provide a count of the barriers that we have in our system, as well as guidance on remediation priority. As you can see on the report, some barriers are compound, like the first one highlighted on the right side image 3.2, and some are simple, like the 4.1 barrier down in the middle. It's important to note that the methodology used in cost estimating does not accurately represent the cost to remediate a barrier in the present day. For example, regrading the surface of 93 feet of asphalt path is estimated in the transition plan to cost less than $1,500, which is far less than what we would currently estimate. From these facility reports, we entered all of this data into a Microsoft Access database. This slide shows an image, which is a screen capture of that database. Highlighted in red near the center of this image, you see the same 3.2 elements from the previous slide with all of their narrative information entered on the row. While Microsoft Access has been a great tool for managing this data set for the last several years, it is being phased out by Microsoft, and we are moving all of this data to an SQL database so that our Parks GIS team can enter it onto a map layer that will provide greater functionality than Access has done in the past, with the key benefit of allowing us to really easily look at accessible routes to specific amenities in a way that we might be able to work towards making publicly available. In fiscal year 22-23, by the end of it, 18% of barriers identified in the transition plan had been remediated using program and non-program funds. However, according to the transition plan, 61% of all total barriers should have been remediated by the end of that fiscal year. And
Evan,
yes,
let her know when to advance this.
next slide, please. Thank you. Yes, so fiscal year 22-23 program summary. As I mentioned, in fiscal year 22-23, at the end, 18% of total barriers in parks had been remediated, where we should have been remediated 64%. And as we look forward, without additional resources, the gap between actual remediation and planned remediation will continue to grow. Some key accomplishments of the program in fiscal year 22-23 were adopting the program budget for fiscal year 23-24, conducting 10 meetings of the previously mentioned technical advisory committee, and holding 7 meetings of the Parks Accessibility Advisory Committee. We remediated 106 barriers at 6 different park sites. And like I said, that totaled up to 18% of the total, or that brought us to 18% of the total. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide shows 2 charts. At left, we summarize the barriers remediated by Parks Equity Score, which ranges from 1 to 5. And at right, we show the amount of program dollar allocations that went to COVID certified firms. The program applies an equity lens to barrier remediation in a few different ways. First, by prioritizing the remediation of barriers with high capital project equity scores, which is based on the estimated aggregate demographics of a service area as compared to citywide Portland estimates. Demographics that factor into the equity score include the percentage of persons under the age of 18, percentage of households below the poverty line, as well as percentage of people of color within those areas. The Bureau is currently working to revise this equity score to include more data sets, including people living with disabilities. In analyzing census data, we found that there's a strong correlation between disability and age, and we can get age data from the census within a half mile of our parks, but where we cannot get explicit disability data. So we're working to refine that correlation, and more analysis is needed to apply it to the Parks Equity tool, but we are working on that. To date, we've remediated, and what the chart at left shows is that to date, we've remediated over 21% of our highest equity score barriers. Much more detail on this is contained within the report if you're interested in digging in. Efforts are made across all program allocations to meet or exceed the city's the city's utilization targets for COVID certified small business. However, in fiscal year 22-23, only 12% of the overall program dollars were paid to contractors or consultants that were certified. And this, over the life of the program, is an atypical allocation result, and we attribute it to the use of a job order contracting system where we as the Bureau were able to select our design consultant, but we relied on a third party to select our contractor. Next slide, please. The second objective, stated objective of the transition plan program is to address barriers cost effectively. We found that funding both entirely new and supplementing funding to existing projects really maximizes that cost efficiency of barrier remediation by taking advantages of scale, project management, assignment, design, permitting, procurement, and construction. Initial estimates that we've collected over the past several years indicate that there's an average cost range of about $9,000 to $15,000 for capital project barrier remediation and about $300 per barrier for maintenance barrier remediation. Although it's important to note that that data is variable, as barriers don't have different weights for different complexity. So 1,000 feet of a hard surface pathway and widening a doorway in a restroom, maybe they're weighted the same. So it's kind of a tough data set to really apply numeric value to. In fiscal year 22-23, we funded one whole park project at Northgate Park and provided supplemental funding to ongoing capital projects at Berrydale Park, Mount Scott Community Center, and Selwood Park. Next slide, please. Further expanding on this objective of addressing barriers cost effectively, this slide shows two circular charts that both address program budget allocations.
Is it this one?
This is that one. Sorry. Maybe I should look and see what's going on. So yes, as I said, this slide shows two circular charts that address program budget allocations at both the beginning and the end of fiscal year 22-23. And the takeaways from this slide are that overall maintenance projects spent 9% less than anticipated at the start of the fiscal year, and that the full program contingency was ultimately expanded by absorbing unspent administration and maintenance allocations where capital project allocations nearly held steady. The total budget allocation in fiscal year 22-23 was $2,428,242. Next slide, please.
Are we out of order?
We're out of order.
Do we need the next one?
Yeah. I like that one. This one's great. Sorry for the mix up there, folks. So objective 3, addressing barriers in a holistic and proactive manner. This slide shows the most critical information off of this slide is showing the amount of maintenance level and capital level barriers that remain to be remediated. Which we have classified all of the barriers across those two classifications. At the end of the fiscal year, 74.4% of maintenance level barriers, which can be taken to read as simple barriers, remain, and 87.8% of capital or complex barriers remain. Next slide. Another way to look at this same information is by what funding source was used to remediate which barrier. This is complicated data to take in on the slide, I realize. But we showed two horizontal bar charts that look at barriers remediated by funding source and by fiscal year. We work to ensure that the projects funded by the program are coordinated with other capital projects, as I mentioned, as well as with different sources of funding. The Assets and Development Division has worked, as was mentioned in the introduction, to supplement the effectiveness of the general fund allocation by remediating barriers with the core scope of capital projects and by funding 2 full-time employees with the professional repair and maintenance services carpentry team. To date, the 2014 Parks Replacement Bond has accounted for 50% nearly of barrier remediation between 2015 and 2021. System development charges, grants, and other miscellaneous sources of funding have also contributed significantly, again, accounting for nearly 40% of remediation since 2015. In fiscal year 22-23, the majority of barrier remediation came from the fully funded ADA program project at Northgate Park, as well as the PRMS, Professional Repair and Maintenance Services Team programs, completing a renovation of the Essex Park restroom. And Jessica, for your note, we remediated 2 barriers at Rose City Park, so that got on the list as well. Next slide, please.
This slide or next slide?
No, this is good. This is good. So all of that said, there are a number of technical remediation challenges that we have faced across the life of the program and will continue to face in the future. This slide is primarily text-based with some points that I will summarize. And there's an image in the bottom right corner that illuminates a particularly complex barrier that has several subcomponents. Among these challenges are recurring barriers, things that kind of happen and need to be continually addressed to maintain a state of compliance, such as the tension on a door closer or adding additional engineered wood fiber at a play area to ensure that that play area is accessible to folks with mobility devices. There's a significant portion of the original number of barriers that were identified that we have classified as category 4, which are those that don't directly count towards our accessibility obligation due to some of the nuances of the Title II law. However, sometimes they do still need to be remediated. That can complicate our sort of straight line path to addressing our core required barriers. I think I've talked a couple different times about complex barriers. Sometimes one individual thing can have 5 subcomponents, so you can get it partially complete, and that creates a kind of a splintered barrier to track within the system. And there's also a significant, we have identified some significant gaps within our system that weren't touched by the transition plan. Those include our internal maintenance facilities, as well as a few other key areas, which include our natural areas, our park frontages, as well as our kind of broad spectrum operations centers. At the natural areas, we recognize that these are a key part of our portfolio, and we're working to try to quantify the scale of accessibility issues in these spaces with data collection and analysis across some of our program areas. At park frontages, we are working with PBOT to identify a pathway to proactively address park frontages ahead of our capital projects to try to find efficiencies in the public works permitting system, as well as efficiencies and timeline for addressing some of these barriers. This is really important from a programmatic access lens, where we recognize that for people to access the experiences in the park, they first need to be able to get into the park. So we really are trying to focus on that as a collaboration point. And while it doesn't apply to fiscal year 22-23, we have made some recent good progress on that, both internally with our GIS techs and making a frontage gap database or what do you call it, dashboard that pulls a lot of this information from different sources into one place that has been really helpful for these conversations recently. At our employee and maintenance facilities, the 2014 bond, 2 projects that I've managed outside of my time with the program have been specifically focused on internal maintenance facilities, bringing them up to modern workplace standards, but also into compliance with the ADA law. Those are the projects at the Mount Tabor Maintenance Facility, as well as the Urban Forestry Operations Center. Looking forward to fiscal year 24-25, we know that the Office of Equity and Human Rights is convening a task force for Bureau self-assessment. And we expect the results of that program to potentially present more challenges or additional information to be considered alongside the transition plan. Next slide, please. Oh gosh, they're already there.
She just did.
All right, well, you got the punchline out ahead of it. This is a complex chart. That might be difficult to dig into even as I try to go through it. So what you see on the screen, if you are able to see this image, is a chart that shows overall number of barriers on the vertical axis and time by fiscal year on the horizontal axis. Starting from the top left corner, you'll see an orange line on the very top, which shows our actual completion, actual remediation timeline. The blue line shows the transition plan commitment remediation timeline, and the dashed green line shows a recovery path that represents the amount of additional resources the Parks Bureau may need in order to recover our commitments in barrier remediation that we presented to council in 2015. So in drawing some connections between these lines, you can see at the end of fiscal year 22-23, there's nearly a 7,000 barrier gap between our planned completion and our actual completion. And then looking forward a bit to the inflection point near the bottom third of the blue line, that is a milestone year in the transition plan commitments that represents 75% completion. And if we forecast our current completion into fiscal year 25-26, we are looking at a nearly 9,000 barrier gap. And then lastly, while we talk about milestones, the most notable one is fiscal year 35-36, which is the stated end date for full barrier remediation. As I mentioned earlier, the dashed green line shows the recovery resource funding that we have estimated. And as of fiscal year 22-23, we're forecasting the need for at least an additional $8 million, 360,000 per year to meet that 2035 commitment. Ultimately, this gap has been documented since the inception of the transition plan program, and in fiscal year 19-20, the annual report projected a $4 million recovery funding need of no less than $4 million. And as we've talked about, we received 1 million, and we have seen this gap continue to grow. This slide and this graph really is meant to tell a complex financial and technical story in one place. But it's really important to remember while looking at this and while considering all the data and the timelines that go into it, that these barriers represent real impediments to Portlanders' access to the park system and their ability to get there in the first place and to enjoy it once they're there. So it really is a critical focus area. And that is the last slide.
Thank you so much. Opening report. Just to let everybody know, we are at 6:40, meaning that I will interrupt you at 6:45 to ask about whether or not we have any public comments, and then we can go back into the questions. And I'm just going to do a round table. Holly, please go ahead and get started.
I have a lot of questions, so I'm not going to do that, but I maybe would like to connect with you at a different time to ask additional questions, if that's okay. I guess I'll start by saying, right, the city has continuously failed the disability community, and this is, right, an example of what failure looks like over a long period of time. I mean, right, the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. This work starts and being documented in 2014, correct? Lots of failure. We're not on a good trajectory to do anything. And the ADA is the lowest bar you can possibly pass in terms of what inclusion looks like. It just means people get in the door to use the same facilities and access that other people have. It doesn't address any barriers of staff training or systemic policy barriers or how people are treated in a moment. So I recognize all the work being done, and I'm not saying you're failing. I'm saying that it is a system-wide failure of accounting for people. That's my soapbox. I'll get off that now and just ask, what are, when you talk about like facilities versus natural areas and natural areas not being included, what does that mean? Is that trailways? Is that signage? Like, or is that, what does that actually mean? Natural areas not being included in this?
In this context, it specifically means that our natural areas were not assessed for compliance with ADA Title II in 2014, when this third-party assessment was done.
But does that mean like, what is a natural, like, is Kelly Point Park, the entire thing, is that considered a natural, like, what is a natural area versus, you know what I mean? Like, is it, are you talking just woods or like wetlands? Are you talking about the actual built environment within a park?
I think anything that would have been considered a natural area, classified as a natural area then, which may have changed, like right now we have parks that we call hybrid parks, which I think is a phrase and a terminology we've come up with because because we have natural areas within what in parks that also have developed parcels.
Yeah.
So I think we could probably look at each park that was included, but I don't think a detailed description is gonna help to get to where you want to get to. The fact is that they did not look at them in 2014 when they did the assessment. And so we know they've been excluded.
So is there a list of those parks that would be available to see which ones haven't been assessed at all?
I don't know. I would imagine the original assessment would have that.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
Is there a list of all of the parks, AKA natural areas that weren't assessed as a part of the 2014 transition plan?
No, I'm aware of the list of the inclusions. I'm not aware of the list of the explicit park area exclusions.
Okay.
Like yeah, that's the short answer.
I would love to see that is my very short answer to that. I'm gonna stop for other people. We have limited amounts of time, but this is my thing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be happy to talk about it at length.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Bonnie, go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation, Evan. My question is related to that. And I guess I would like to understand, because as I was reviewing some of the examples that you listed up there, some of the examples were grade changes. And I am imagining, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the assessment at some point said, well, you know, and making those entirely ADA accessible would change the nature and character of those parks. So I'm imagining that at some point, some judgment was made about what grade changes were going to be just not corrected for, I'm assuming, because we can't make, I'm guessing that's why the natural areas were excluded. So I want to understand that a little bit, because as much as I think we want to remove barriers and make things accessible, I think there are some situations, for example, grade, where I think the nature of the outdoor experience would be fundamentally altered. And I guess I want to understand that a little bit. Can you talk to that?
So astutely observed. It is something that we run up against often when scoping a capital project to address pathways. And it's also one of the issues that I talked about earlier with the cost, where they say regrade a pathway for 100 feet, it's going to cost you $1,500. But what they're talking about is, you know, a significant cut and regrading of a large swath of park. So what we tend to do, rather than cut down a significant amount of trees to regrade a path and add landings and handrails and all the things that would take to make that specific path compliant, we look at providing an accessible route to the amenity that the existing path serves. That's like, that's the short answer. And we also, of course, try to use our design expertise across landscape architecture as well as intentional park planning to make sure that we can meet the law and provide a meaningful programmatic access experience and not need to significantly modify our natural assets.
That's helpful. Thank
my
you.
off the top answer.
Thank you. We're at that time, so I am going to ask if there's anybody online or in person who would like to provide a public comment. If so, please raise your hand.
And it doesn't look like we have anybody here for public comment, so thank you so much. Please go ahead, Sue Ann. And
Thank you for your presentation. You just mentioned something that is related to what I was think about. What needs to be done for the parks conditions that's already built, that needs to be improved as much as it's possible. From here forward, you mentioned about we rely on expertise of landscape designer or architects to follow what is delineated in the law, what is legal. As a designer, building architecture and also park, I would hope that maybe parks can lead. A way of moving forward is start with ADA design. We don't do it as a bare minimum. We do it as this is what is universally acceptable for all people. And if we do it that way, then it's not negotiable, like, oh, how many bathrooms you need to accommodate ADA compliant, or how many you don't. It's you do it, it takes more space. It may cost a bit more upfront, but then you don't have to separate. This is ADA compliant, this is not ADA compliant. And if we can lead that, we need to demonstrate as a good practice, good example, as much as possible. We don't, the law gives you some kind of minimum grading, but let's go beyond, because that's the right thing to do.
So, and you'll be happy to know that whenever we build something new, we do. We absolutely lead with ADA. The problem is we're playing catch up on a 100+ year system that, as we know, has $600 million+ worth of deferred maintenance, and much of that is tied to this work. So
I don't want to deal with that.
I know it's
We know that.
we don't want to talk about that, but
From here forward.
But my point is that anything new that we build, we do lead with accessibility. And it's not just because it's right, it's because it's, you're right, it is the right thing to do.
So the aquatic center.
Yeah, everything.
That's just, we can showcase as like we do more than what is required.
I don't want to take up too much more floor space on this, but I would put in two technical points, I guess. One is that we have integrated a review, a check-in with myself, the transition plan program coordinator, with the startup of any new capital projects. And something that we talked about in the presentation is the impact that the 2014 Parks Replacement Bond had on barrier remediation through primarily renovation focused projects. And they've contributed massively to our need in barrier remediation. And we're also coordinating across our maintenance groups so that our internal small project renovation work is bringing the existing structures into compliance.
thank you. Patty, please go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. So interesting. So we get $1 million a year, is my understanding. So when all these numbers, estimates, was there escalation rolled into that? Because as a contractor, I mean, I think $1 million and I see all the deficiencies, I'm thinking, you know.
Yeah, the short answer is no.
And I'll say that we supplement that $1 million every year, or at least as much as we can. So I think, Evan, you said it was like 2.5 million or so that was spent in 23-24. And so so we went above and beyond the $1 million. We don't stop at $1 million. So whatever major maintenance we can add. Also, we hired 2 carpenters that all they do is remediate ADA issues. So that's like the more simple ones. So that has also helped sort of chip away at the list.
And then second question with the list, you know, so you have limited funds. Is there a way to prioritize? Because we know we can't do everything, but what can we do that would, I don't know, prove most useful? I mean, we want to do everything to the public. So is there a strategy of making something a priority?
There's both a prioritization guidance process contained within the transition plan. And Parks has spent a lot of time applying analysis to that, I think, to work to combine the prioritization that was there to baseline with our equity processes and our bureau's values. So yeah, we have guiding documents on prioritization.
Thank you.
Thank you. Casey, I saw that you had your hand up. Did you have a question still?
Director Long actually answered the question, but I would take a moment to say thank you very much to Evan for this very sobering report. I really appreciate it. And a kind of a side question, I might have missed it in your presentation. Do you have an amount that the levy funding is being provided to cure these issues?
I would say that just any portion of levy funding that's funding staff who do any work related to capital projects and maybe PRMS. But the levy funding is operational funds and largely, we made a decision for it not to be applied to capital work. So it would be challenging and probably nominal to do that analysis.
Thank you. I have a question and first I would love to have you back because I think this is an ongoing conversation, especially with Healthy Park, Healthy Portland. These are one population, as Ally pointed out, that has been long suffering to be centered within the park system and in general. My question is, well, I have a question and a statement. Is there any way to make a lot of this really interesting information a little bit more legible to the general public? So they can absorb it and hopefully be champions along with supporting some of the changes. The other question that I have is, and I think this might be a little bit of a clarification, is what compliance to what? Because Parks and Rec is kind of a unique situation. Is it a compliance to a scooter? Is it a compliance to a wheelchair? We have people that their mobility devices become their bicycles, that when Gateway Green was here, that their bikes can't fit into the restrooms, which creates a barrier to them using a bike path as was actually created with them in mind, but not giving them the full services they need to fully benefit from it. So how is the National Recreation and Park Association and how is Portland Parks and Rec dealing with maybe the discrepancies between Title II compliance and what our community members actually need to fully engage the park system, how they choose to recreate?
To the second question, I'll have to get back to you also. I will have to know that. To the coming back question, I would say I'd be happy to. This is a significant portion of my work plan and it's a very much an ongoing conversation in my workspace. Let's see, sorry, would you restate?
I'll send some questions over, probably maybe
I
Ally.
think that might be a question that I'm sure Evan could opine on, but it feels like there's other people who could weigh in on that because it's not, as we know, the accessibility conversation isn't just about physical barriers and physical structures, right? So I think I mentioned that, I think at the offset when I introduced the subject, that we're doing a lot of work and there's other work, and we could certainly have those other people who are doing that work come in and talk about it. But I don't know what the National Recreation Parks Association, like as an industry leader, I don't know how they're
supporting you in any way?
No, I mean, there's tons of resources. And we certainly take advantage of those, whether they're webinars or reports, and quite frankly, networking with other jurisdictions. So they're quite helpful in that regard, but I wouldn't know whether or not we've reached out to them specifically about this, but.
Because we're just gonna be using these spaces a lot differently than if we were in a work situation, a typical work situation where widening the door might be enough versus bringing in all of your equipment and feeling secure in that. Then my last question, are there any wheelchair accessible swings within the Portland Parks and Recreation system?
Yes.
And how would community members be able to find out where to access these facilities, these infrastructures within their park system?
Website,
This park website, is there a particular
under playgrounds or under accessible playgrounds.
accessible playground? Great, thank you so much.
We even have a trampoline for wheelchair users.
And it looks like Ally, Adrian, was it Adrian?
I think.
No, Chris and then Adrian.
Chris, Adrian, Ally, Patty?
And I'm not relating questions specifically.
Okay, go ahead, and then we'll go
So,
to Chris.
you know, when you say it's on the website, that kind of stirs, because what happens if you aren't accessible to the website? I know, it's, yeah, that is true. We have 311, I mean, there are other, we have a customer service center that people can call. We have meaningful access statement around how to get it, other information. We do have a written guide for programs of recreation, which we've been sort of phasing out because it's limited demand right now. That remains challenging. I will note that our new website, very dry, very uninspired, but accessible. And so that's. But, you know, unfortunately, that is, you know, what in large part is why it's accessible. Because it doesn't have tons of photos and graphs and charts that are not readable.
Thank you, Chris, please go ahead.
Thank you, Evan. I wanted to say, this was a great presentation. I do want to applaud the work that the Portland Parks and Recreation Department is doing, given the limited funding that they have for this area. Just want to elevate that our values and what we can do for ADA compliance is really reflected in the budget and the funding that comes to the Bureau to do this work. So it is great to see that you've done the priority within equity and maximizing funding and projects in areas that will have the most impact when you do have that funding available as a department. It is interesting to see the differences of where funding is coming from over the years between capital funding and maintenance funding. And then within fiscal year 22 or 23, primarily coming from the ADA program. And so what can we do as Portlanders and the public to really push the city for ADA compliance and have more funding dedicated to do this work and actually remediate these barriers and get this money to the Bureau? Because right now, that with the funding that we have, it says fiscal year 84 to 85. To be able, and those are just the barriers that are listed that we have. So it really is a funding issue as we are moving forward and looking at this and moving beyond ADA compliance. And it would also be interesting from a legal mindset to see how the city wide is taking approach to ADA compliance, not just within this Bureau versus the legal risk that they have and what they would need to pay out from lawsuits about not being compliance within the facilities. And so I just think it is a really big opportunity for broader advocacy in the funding space for the bureaus to be able to do this work.
The board could certainly always advocate for additional funding to increase the general funding that we receive currently. And elevate this story. But I also want to flag, you know, we've been having conversations about a future potential bond, and should we pursue one, ensuring that the transition plan meets its goal is certainly something that I would, and my goal is a 2035 goal. You know, I would certainly advocate for that to be high on the list of priorities if we were to pursue a bond. So there is a way forward. We just need to continue to advocate and, you know, and I do believe there's a role for the board in that, regardless of whether or not we pursue a bond or not. $1 million is laughable. And it does not, you know, it does not align with what the city of Portland has stated its values are as it relates to inclusivity.
You just keep our eye on the time. We are at 7:01. We have two people, Adrian and Ally.
I'm gonna pass all.
You're passing?
I'm good to, we're passing.
Lauren,
Story, I think so.
And
Yeah.
so we do have Lauren. Do you want to round us out before we head out, Lauren?
Just want to say one quick thing that we have done recently, some pretty significant accessible playgrounds, like Adina was saying, like Gabriel Park is one of them, which is great. And we also are currently working on, through a Metro grant, the Bristlecone Pine Trail, which is access to nature itself, a paved trail through the natural area up in Washington Park and Wade Arboretum. So just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you so much. And a little bit of homework to the working groups. If you want to add any questions or regarding either the board agenda or any questions regarding ADA, the transition, please do it through the working groups and send it along to me. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the meeting at 7:02. Thank you so much, board member.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry for that slide.